Have you ever taken an intelligence test and felt either really good or really bad about yourself as a result? Here are 5 tests that people actually believe to be accurate measures of their intelligence, when really, they were mostly made-up baloney. First scientific attempt at measuring intelligence came from Sir Francis Galton, cousin of Charles Darwin. Between 1884 and 1890, Galton ran a service out of a museum in London where he charged people a small fee to tell them how smart they were. 17,000 people paid him and were given little cards with their scores printed on them. Eventually, Galton published his data in a book called Hereditary Genius, where he hypothesized that genius is genetically determined. His methodology favored arbitrary traits that he himself deemed to be related to genius. And he thought that if the right men and women were selected to mate every generation, that we could build a perfect race. Any of this sound familiar? That's because Galton is considered the founder of eugenics, the belief that human beings can be improved through breeding desired traits and reducing undesired ones. It's fairly controversial, and not a lot of people, besides the Nazis, bought into it. Also, his tests for intelligence were just a little ridiculous. One was a whistle that measured the highest pitch a person could perceive. Another involved subjects picking up various cases and choosing which ones were heaviest. What did these things have to do with intelligence? I don't know. One of Galton's admirers was James McKeen Cattell, a psychologist at Columbia University. Cattell devised similar tests of reaction time and movement that he ran in his laboratory. His main goal was to strengthen psychology's scientific credentials as a discipline while advocating for a psychophysical approach to intelligence testing. One of Cattell's students was Clark Vissler, who based his dissertation on examining if Cattell's test scores were valid or meaningful. Did the scores correlate to one another or to college grades? Upon further inspection, the scores didn't even correlate with each other. Some defended Cattell and said that Vissler's research was flawed. His conclusion about Cattell's methodology was not. Like Galton and Cattell, Cyril Burt's ideas for intelligence testing related to the subject's heredity. Burt thought that since prep school students scored higher than other students, they must therefore have a higher degree of innate intelligence. In 1926, when he began advocating for a national testing program in England to identify the brightest children. His hope was the disadvantaged children would get more educational attention than they usually receive. The United Kingdom actually implemented his program, which claimed intelligence is not fixed until a child is approximately 11 years old. Between 1943 and 1966, Burt published articles on the intelligence of identical twins who had been raised in separate homes. His thesis was that their similar scores supported his genetic view of intelligence. But when Burt died, he was accused of using fraudulent data to support his nature over nurture viewpoint. It turned out this data had either disappeared or had actually never existed. His supposed research assistants weren't even able to be confirmed as real people. To date, the conclusions on whether Burt falsified his data are mixed, but it's certain that his assessment of intelligence was deeply flawed. More intelligence testing was solicited during World War I when psychologists were assigned to screen soldiers for placement. Army Alpha was a verbal test each soldier took to determine his intelligence. They subsequently tested 1.7 million adult men, comparing their results against 400 previously tested Californians. When the averages didn't line up, the Army had to choose one group to maintain as their baseline for intelligence. They chose the 400 Californians over their own soldiers. The Army didn't actually care about defining intelligence per se. What they wanted was a reliable method for classifying their recruits. So the term A-man didn't necessarily mean these soldiers were geniuses, just that they'd fit the officer slots that needed to be filled. One of the most interesting and still inaccurate intelligence tests doesn't even assess human beings. The Turing test, named for its creator, codebreaker Alan Turing, requires a machine to attempt to pass as a human through a written chat with a person. If the computer is mistaken for a human more than 30% of the time during a series of 5-minute conversations, it passes the test. Just this year, a chatbot named Eugene Gustman was the first to pass the test. It posed as a 13-year-old from the Ukraine who didn't speak English very well. Some see this as an unfair influence in Eugene's ability to convince people he is human. More importantly, though, is whether the Turing test is a valid measurement of intelligence anyway. How does fooling a human judge demonstrate that you are clever or intelligent? While it provides fuel for philosophical debate, the Turing test isn't really taken seriously as a measure of intelligence for either artificial intelligence or humans. These 5 historical tests of intelligence clearly don't measure more than a test on the back of a cereal box might. I can tell you one thing that will give you at least more knowledge to work with. Visit HowStuffWorks.com, where we've got information on everything from the history of IQ tests to home home remedies for urinary tract infections. And if you're not following our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and other social media sites, you're missing out on consistent blasts of useful knowledge. The highest mark of intelligence would obviously be if you subscribe to our video channel, so you always know when new fun facts are available.